It is going to be a fun week in the land of golf because we have major number 3 of the year coming up with the U.S. Open teeing off on Thursday in Massachusetts. We have got awkward press conferences galore. We've got amazing golfers littering the field and a pretty fun one on tap. We're going to break things down from a DFS perspective, let you know where we are looking at for our favorite options on FanDuel for this week and get you set to try to win some money over on FanDuel. Welcome on in to the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, it is U.S. Open week. How you doing today?
Yeah, broke out the U.S. Open shirt.
Why is it green? I'm curious why the U.S. Open shirt is green, because it's not like, I feel like the Masters should have a monopoly on all green associated with like golf majors.
Well, Aaron Hills, for one. I actually tried to wear, because I wear this one a little bit more often than another. I just realized like most people probably just listen to the podcast and I'm talking about colors and stuff, but
there might be one person who stumbles on the YouTube video after the fact. So like for this one person, go ahead.
Well, let me paint you a picture.
Sure.
I was wearing a red shirt. It was a U.S. Open shirt from Pebble Beach.
Okay.
Shout out Gary Woodland. Not a good color for me. Never really wear it. So I put on the Aaron Hills one.
Why do you think red doesn't work for you? I want to hear the in-depth breakdown of this.
We don't have time to get into all my insecurities. So
okay. Well, I've got FanDuel logos everywhere. So like at least I've got that covered. I got one here. Got FanDuel here, FanDuel hat, FanDuel back here. Like, sorry, company guy, get on my level. I had the TVG hat over there. I could wear that too. Wear both hats.
I knew you were going to wear that black FanDuel hat, which I also have. So I was going to wear a different FanDuel hat with like a cursive script on it, but it didn't look good with the block lettering of the shirt. So,
you put way more thought into this than I do. I just picked stuff up and accidentally wore a FanDuel hat and a FanDuel shirt in front of my FanDuel backdrop. And here we are to break down FanDuel salaries for the U.S. Open. Company guy, man. Just trying to milk that money for all it is worth. It's going to be a fun podcast for today. So we're going to get you set for the U.S. Open at the Country Club at Brookline. Break down what you need to know about the course, break down the field for this week, roster construction, our favorite plays in each tier, and so much more. Let's start things off here by talking about that course. It is a Country Club at Brookline. It is 7,264 yards and a par 70. This is the fourth time this course hosted a major, but it is the first time since 1988. So don't really have a lot of or any course history data here outside of Matty Fitz winning amateur title back in, I think, 2013. There are 156 golfers in the field. The top 60 plus ties make the cut after 2 rounds. So that sounds tough, and it is, but there are a lot of guys here who are not going to be as competitive necessarily. So it is tough to find guys who will make the cut, but maybe not as daunting as it sounds at first glance. So Brandon, what do we know about the Country Club at Brookline? What do we need to know to fill out lineups? And what are the key things to zone in on for this week?
Yeah, so I've been trying to ingest as much content as I can, watch some videos, look at some course overview stuff. Of course, you'll see some videos and pictures of like the U.S. Open rough, because that's just a pretty much a constant. But in terms of like, I'll start from the top down. We're looking at as you mentioned, 7,200 and change par 70. It's about 40 yards longer than the average par 70 on tour. So cumulatively about an average par 70 from that standpoint. If you look at things from a fairway acres per yardage standpoint, which is a pretty good indicator of fairway width, it's about average there. But the green sizes is one thing that does stand out. Just under 4,400 square feet on average. It's about 2/3 as big as your average PGA tour, your average PGA Tour green. So we're looking at some small POA greens, which is not a very common surface. It's hard to build up a large sample on POA. It's important to keep in mind that when we do reference POA splits, which I will for some golfers, we'll be digging back generally to get to 50 rounds like a few years. So keep that in mind. But that's definitely something that I'm trying to leverage a little bit because POA is such an uncommon surface. Looking at the typical U.S. Open scoring, so I won't get into that because we all know that they generally want to play around par. They say they don't care about par, but generally want to play just a few shots under par for the winner. So that's kind of the overview. And then for the course itself, I mean, if you look at the course, it's a up and down, a lot of elevation, a lot of blind tee shots, kind of typical for your sort of Northeast or New England courses. Reminds me a little bit of the course I play most in central Pennsylvania. I'm not saying it's like comparable, but I'm still fairly new to golf, and I didn't realize how uncommon blind tee shots were. I know like PGA, you don't really get those on the PGA Tour, but the course I play is just
it's the exact same thing.
All elevation.
Actually, the one by my house growing up was too. Which is why I lost a lot of golf balls because I'm not good at golf. But
I hit a tee shot, it goes dead straight, and I'm like, all right, it's up there somewhere, and then it's
not.
So again, that's not I'm trying to stay on topic here, but like it's going to be a bit of a unique setup because most PGA Tour courses, which is what I again am most accustomed to watching, they don't really play that way. And I've heard I was watching the No Laying Up. They have a YouTube video on the course. Talked to Gil Hans, who did the renovation. He said he referenced the sort of prototypical Jack Nicklaus. Look, I walk into the locker room and I can tell how many guys I'm competing against because some guys are complaining about the setup, the locker room, whatever it is that they're not happy with. He's like, they're going to be guys who basically are going to just be psyched out by playing this type of course because they're not used to it. So it's going to be a very unique setup. So with all that said, we also know that it's a U.S. Open setup, and the U.S. Open, the USGA likes to set things up pretty typically, pretty sort of similarly. And we get that long rough, which actually means that strokes gained off the tee doesn't matter that much because you have to be good with your irons, your wedges, and your putter to contend. And actually, fairway accuracy is more important than distance. So I'm looking at accuracy off the tee to some degree, strokes gained approach, strokes gained putting, and strokes gained around the green as my big keys for this week.
So how much are we downplaying off the tee play? Because like we've been doing this past couple weeks, and every week it's been like, oh, okay, Cam Smith. Oh, okay, Cam Smith again. And like, we have these guys who like should fit that archetypically. I don't know if that's actually a word. Like how much can we downplay? How much can we bump up guys who are not going to gain off the tee, basically?
So it's less about the off the tee play specifically, and it's more bumping up guys who have a really good short game with good irons. That does happen to be Cam Smith. So I know it's like the same thing said a different way, but it's not like you're looking for guys who are bad off the tee and you say, oh, this is going to be a good week for them. If they don't have the other stuff, they're going to get eaten alive based on what this course offers. Because
so the way you would phrase it is we want to emphasize irons, emphasize short game. That's what you would say, basically, correct?
Yes, and avoiding bogeys. Last week, I thought that off the tee didn't matter too much. It ended up, look at the leaderboards: Rory McIlroy, Tony Finau, Justin Thomas, Sam Burns, Cory Connors, Keith. It mattered more than I thought, but it was a course we hadn't seen in a while as well. So again, I'm basing this off of when we've actually gotten strokes gain data from U.S. Opens. Historically, it's not been about pounding driver, even though some of the most recent U.S. Open winners have that ability. Right. They, though, in their events, Rahm, Bryson, Woodland, these guys gained a lot of strokes around the green, which is a very crucial component to the U.S. Open that we don't always see on the PGA Tour.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. We're going to break down some guys who have done well at U.S. Opens on similar setups because, like you said, they try to keep things a certain way. We'll talk about guys who have done well in those conditions previously in just 1 second. But first, a quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, because in addition to our PGA podcast, we of course have The Solo Shot, our MLB DFS podcast every weekday. We've got UFC, we've got NASCAR, NFL back in the fall. A lot of good stuff. If you hit subscribe, you'll get every podcast for each sport as they go live sent to you. So search for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. Also, the MLB season is in full swing, and you can play a free daily fantasy challenge with a $10,000 prize pool. It is the Body Armor Inside Edge daily fantasy contest, and it's easy to play. Just set your 5-player lineup while staying under the salary cap. The MVP position will get double the points. The star position, that's for basketball. Anyway, the Body Armor Inside Edge contest is for this Tuesday's matchup between the Angels and the Dodgers. So be sure to enter before then. You can sign up for the free contest at FanDuel.com/league/Body Armor. Again, that's FanDuel.com/league/Body Armor. Make sure to play this free DFS contest for your chance to win a share of $10,000. Let's dive in here and take a look at some golfers who have done well in previous U.S. Opens, because again, we want guys who can do well at this kind of setup. Brandon, when we have that in mind, who has stood out on this type of event in the past?
Well, speaking of the Aaron Hill shirt, Brooks Koepka, Xander Schauffele, just basically tailor-made for U.S. Opens. We've seen Louis Oosthuizen, Victor Hovland, despite the fact that I'm emphasizing around the green. Hovland's played pretty well at U.S. Opens. Patrick Reed, going to be an intriguing watch this week.
Why would that be?
Well, we all know.
Okay, cool.
Hideki, love to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Dustin Johnson as well. Interesting to see. Justin Thomas, interesting to see because of the RBC Canadian Open. Bryson DeChambeau, interesting to see as well. Brian Harman, Rory McIlroy, winner at the RBC Canadian Open. Big congrats to Jim. Comparable congrats to me for being such a nice guy and letting you change your picks, even though they were already locked in last week on the show. And then Tommy Fleetwood.
I didn't even bring up the fact that I picked Rory last week. A, because I forgot. B, I didn't say it. You did. You're telling people that I was right.
This was a way to, again, say, hey, look, I think it's 3 of the past 4 weeks combined we've had the winner.
You had Sam Burns. I had Rory. Who was the other one?
JT at PGA.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's...
He checks on a heater?
Oh, that's 3 straight.
Is it 3 straight?
That we did on the...
yeah. Well, I did picks when you were gone. Had Cam Smith, who was ahead for Thursday, Friday. Looked like he was cruising, and then little tank job on the weekend. But hey, we could have gone 4 in a row.
But yeah, Rory sets up well. Love Rory this week. We'll talk about him more in just a moment. But Tommy Fleetwood, if that one got lost in the shuffle. Some of that we're not usually as high on as others, but I've been kind of coming around on Tommy Fleetwood, and he's got some decent U.S. Open history as well.
Yeah, so looking at this past U.S. Open history, is there anyone to you who stands out as being like, okay, I'm not into their form right now. However, I can bump them up due to the way they played on this typically, because we always care more about current form than we do about setup. But for some guys, like Brooks, mostly, form doesn't matter as much. So is anyone specifically you're feeling like, okay, I do need to manually bump them up, potentially override the form as a result of how well they've played previously at setups like this?
I'd say Brooks and Xander, who are actually at the top of this. Not that Xander's been bad, but
correct.
He's been very, very consistent. He can get lost. This is probably the first major in a while that I haven't really made him a priority pick. That is a little bit scary to me. Brooks, when it comes to...
You haven't, because he might be in someone's player picks later on, potentially.
Well, if it's not mine, I don't know whose it would be. So
just saying.
But yeah, as far as maybe the best example here would be either Dustin Johnson or Bryson DeChambeau, as someone whose current form isn't particularly strong, but has done well at U.S. Opens. I don't think that that's going to be enough for me.
Yeah.
They have a lot going on. This is probably going to be a longer week for them in terms of prep, with getting through press conferences and just be the energy around it. We're not going to get into specifics, but that is something that I'm not bumping up Patrick Reed Dustin Johnson and Bryson DeChambeau this week because of their decision.
Yeah. It's like a split. They have to have focus in a certain area where a lot of people can kind of coast. And like, that's tough. Like, as you've like so much mental load you can handle and like allocate, and like they have to devote a lot of it to press and stuff this week. So,
and like not even coast, but Rory is like motivated. Like Justin Thomas seems like motivated.
Rory's like dropping like subtweets in like post-game press or post-match press conferences. Despite being brainwashed, he's subtweeting people. Like, it's fun to watch Rory be a little bit, peed off.
Yeah. And like Scheffler, Scheffler did, I don't like Scheffler's, I think, going to be a PGA Tour guy forever. Like, I think these guys are going to have a little bit extra, gas. Even with gas prices being what they are, I think they're going to keep the foot on the gas this week.
Also, regarding the DJ thing, like, their betting odds aren't everything, because the betting public also does occasionally get stuff wrong. There are oversights and stuff like that. But if you look at the odds at FanDuel Sportsbook, DJ is 44-1. That makes it clear that people who move markets have not been buying into Dustin Johnson for this event. And I think that allows us to be okay accounting for the narratives of like, hey, he has a lot on his plate this weekend as far as like all that stuff that's going on. Bryson's 140-1 at a freaking major. Like, that's
former US Open winner.
Yeah. So like, I think it's okay to account for that stuff because the betting public is, and they got a lot of money riding on this, and we should take into account what they're saying with their wallets. So I think it's okay to account for that. Now, one guy you mentioned as having a good history at the US Open, it's a good enough history, getting a bump up there, is Rory Mcilroy. So let's dive into the current form section, talk about golfers with noteworthy form right now. And what more noteworthy than the brainwashy himself, Rory Mcilroy, 11-7. What do you see with Rory recently heading into this event?
Like, this is a family show, but he's like Rory effing McIlroy again, which is that's the motivation that got him at the Ryder Cup. And, he cares about the future of golf. That is very, 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 very evident. And I think that we have to lead off with Rory in current form because, of course, he just won last week. But, he fended off some big names with Justin Thomas, Tony Finau, Sam Burns was up there, a few others. And like, he's been trending up for a while. We've been largely buying in. I wasn't quite there last week. I didn't really have anything against Rory, but we just had other names to pick from, and I was heavier on Justin Thomas. But he's now got 4 top 10s in his past 5 starts. The one that wasn't a top 10 was an 18th place showing at Memorial with below average but not terrible putting. He's up to 2.77 true strokes gained over the past 3 months, according to Data Golf. That is by 0.2 shots better than anyone else, and only 5 other golfers are above a 2.0. Again, we don't talk like about off-course stuff very often, but the motivation factor is it couldn't be more evident. And usually, I would say, coming off of a win, like I don't like back-to-back winners. It just takes a lot to go right. Typically on the PGA Tour, if you win the RBC Canadian Open and it's followed up by some other event, you're probably not going to care as much. But this is the US Open. This is the first major since like the fraction really occurred. And I know Rory's going to be popular, but I don't know if he's going to be like mega chalk because no one ever is mega chalk in majors. And I love Rory this week.
Yeah. I think of that top group, like straight up, he'd be my favorite. Like for a cash game among the options, like even not considering the narrative, I would rank him first just because like he is Rory effing McIlroy, like you said. Like he's golfing that way right now and has been for a couple months now, honestly. Like we've been talking about Rory in current form since before Augusta, I think, in the sense that he was trending up, just hadn't had some of the ball striking stuff wasn't like peak Rory, but now it is. And like, that's frightening. I do think that the roster rate discussion is pertinent though, because we're talking here Monday afternoon. I have no idea how things will track by Wednesday night, but I think we can fairly assume that Rory will be very popular, and I would guess he would be the most popular in this group. So do I like Rory more than those other guys enough to override concerns around roster rate? It's not like, JT's not going to be 10%. Like he's going to be 20 minimum, I'd assume. But if Rory is 30, there's still an edge there. So I think that my kind of process for this is going to be monitor Justin Thomas specifically relative to Rory in terms of buzz. Because if JT is going to be like a significant amount lower than Rory in terms of roster rate, I'll make that pivot. If it's going to be pretty even between Rory, Scheffler, JT, et cetera, Jon Rahm, I might just stick with Rory and be like, I can live with this increased roster rate because the gap is not actually that big. So in a vacuum, Rory is 1, and he might be there even considering circumstances 2, just because I really like him. I think JT is in that tier though. I would just need a little bit of a discount in terms of roster rate to get there.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's JT and Rory at the top for me. They stand out the most. Since I started implementing what we always talk about with spike weeks. So I take, did you have an 85th percentile sort of outcome with your adjusted tee to green numbers and your adjusted putting numbers? JT's done that in 77% of his starts over the past year. Rory is at 71%. Nobody else is above 2/3, which surprisingly Xander is there in third. But JT and Rory also, they're not who you think of as being good to great putters, but they have spike weeks with their putting at a higher rate than you would, than average, which would be about 15% if we're looking at 85th percentile outcomes, something like that. Scheffler is at 20%. He's also not as good with the tee to green numbers there. And if you look at the expected putting, JT and Rory are at about a plus 0.2 to plus 0.25 strokes gained putting per round over the past 50 rounds. Same as Scheffler, but the expectation is that Rory and JT are about where they should be, but that Scheffler's putting, but he should be like a field average sort of putter. So if it's the conversation between those three, I'm going to go Rory, JT, Scheffler specifically for me.
And what about Rahm? Is Rahm I don't know. It's just been weird with it because I keep expecting him to Rahm again, and doesn't really happen.
So one thing that stood out to me with Rahm sort of earlier this year is that he's been, using different putters. His putting was not particularly good. It's sort of back up. He's sort of regressed back to where he should be. It's the around the green play for Rahm that is worrisome. So over the past year, if you count for field strength and you weight more recent rounds, I have him in the 30th percentile and adjusted around the green strokes gained. Scheffler, 85th percentile, JT, 86th, Rory, 89th. Again, Rahm, 30th percentile. That's enough of a separation. I always want to buy low. Always want to buy low on Rahm. I did see that his odds fell to 17-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook. He's now 15-1, so some people took notice of that. But
correct.
If I'm talking DFS, he's got to be 4th out of the 4. And again, I got to stress this. It's a major. I know we're spending a lot of time on this top 4, but you got to nitpick. This is not to say I'm going to talk anyone out of playing Jon Rahm. It's just personally, with his around the green numbers being what they are, I have to rank him 4th out of the top 4.
That is the same way I'd rank them too. So probably bodes well for Rahm's roster rate. But anyway, we could talk more about that later on. For now, let's talk about the second tier. And I want to talk specifically about Will Zalatoris. He is just 10-7, but he's been showing massive upside recently, especially in majors, because we saw Zalatoris obviously have that great run at the PGA Championship. He finished 2nd there, but he was also 6th at the Masters, giving him 5 top 10s in 7 majors since Will Zalatoris became a full-time pro. It's absurd what he's been doing. Since the PGA Championship, we have seen Zalatoris have a miscut at the Charles Schwab, but then followed that up with a 5th at the Memorial. So the short game for Zalatoris is not great, but he's managed to beast out in majors regardless. I tend to care more about short game in tougher fields because you can't have holes and compete. Zalatoris has not a hole, but it's it's like a donut, like a little baby donut hole. And like, it's like there, but it doesn't matter because he's so good. So I think Zalatoris, relative to salary, outside of maybe Mito Pereira, who we'll talk about later on, might be my favorite play in the entire field. How are you viewing Zalatoris this week?
Yeah, he's up there. And the thing to like the distinction to make is short game. Usually that can mean just putting, or it can, I think usually for people it means putting, but it can also mean like wedge play plus putting. And he's about average in this field in wedge play over the past year. It's the putting that's really bad. 10th percentile in expected putting, which is using your splits from within 15 feet, which is very predictive of your long-term putting. However, if you go back to that spike week conversation, you adjust for fields. He has a plus outing in about 19% of his events, which is a little bit more than you would expect, but 56% in terms of tee to green play. He gets there because the tee to green is so good. I keep struggling with Zalatoris. I'm there this week simply because I'm tired of not being in on Zalatoris, and I hate rooting against him. And I root against him because I didn't recommend him, didn't play him, didn't bet him, that kind of stuff. In a major, I'm just going to play Zalatoris. My biggest question is Zalatoris or Sam Burns at 10-5. Statistically, Sam Burns doesn't have the wedge issue to quite the to the degree that Zalatoris does, and he's a much better putter. But Zalatoris gets it done more in majors. I should prefer Burns, but I'm leaning Zalatoris.
No, the answer is porque no los dos. Like, sure. I think there is a strong case to be made. I love Rory. I love JT. There is a strong case to be made for going more balanced this week and peppering this range because Zalatoris is here, because Burns, because Hideki is in that range. I love Hideki.
Lowry.
Shane freaking Lowry.
Matt Fitzpatrick won the U.S. Amateur here 9 years ago.
I mean, let's not make jokes on Matty Fitz. Let's not go too far with this, okay? Guaranteed winner, Matt Fitzpatrick. Also, the Northwestern stack kind of got off the rails last week because Brandon Wu withdrew right away. Lipsky missed the cut, so we're going to ignore that one for the indefinite future. Anyway, Patrick Cantley has not been like consistent recently, but he's 10-8. So like, I think this is a good week to, like, if you're multi-entering, vary your roster construction, where I want to have lines where I have Rory or I have JT, but I also want to have some where I just skip over all of them, jump down to Xander at 11-1 or jump down to Cantley at 10-8 and just like live in the mid-range. I think both those paths are hyper viable for this week, and it's where I want to be. I think this range is superb. Zalatoris is a big part of that. So I would pick Zalatoris over Burns, but I'd rather just use both, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major, so we got to nitpick. We're going to gloss over some names, but I just now realized that both Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka are 44-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook to win a U.S. Open. And if you told us that like 2 years ago, it would have been like, what happened?
Well, like a year and a half ago, DJ won the Masters in November. So like, yeah, not even 2 years ago. It is pretty crazy. Let's move now to Max Homa, $9,900. And actually our next two guys are both 99 exactly. So you talk about Homa, I'll talk about Finau, and then we'll wrap up this discussion on the stellar mid-range.
Is it stellar?
Yes. I'm counting mid-range to be basically Xander. So I'm cheating, but
well, I was thinking mid-range in this conversation. Literally, do you have a 9 in front of your salary? And if you do, your mid-range for like, and it's not as good as it normally is in majors. I have names I like, but it's not like
to me, mid-range is like includes the 10,000 range. So that's why I like it, because I want to get to Hideki, Neiman's kind of in play, like guys like that. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, in the 9,000 range specifically, usually that's where I just find it easy to like rack up recommendations and take some salary savings without playing true values. But I'm a little bit lower on this range. I do think I need to make an upgrade because I like what I'm seeing from Max Homa. So I'm going to go over Homa, who I think is a certified big dog now. Since a 48th at the Masters, he won the Wells Fargo, 13th at the PGA Championship, 23rd at Charles Schwab, 5th at Memorial. those are some pretty big events, big results, and they all stem from good tee to green play, which is honestly as important or more important than just the results themselves. His best putting surface is POA. That's something you want to see. That's just like it's a rare surface. When you see it, it's good to sort of add in for a little bit of extra juice whenever you're trying to separate one guy from the next in a field this good. The biggest issue for Homa historically has been his major performance. He had missed 7 of his first 8 cuts at majors, but has since made 3 straight, including that 13th at the PGA most recently. Again, I'm a little bit lower, it sounds like, on the 9,000 range.
I'm pretty low in the 9,000 range. I was including the other guys in that part too. Yeah.
So you're going to talk about Tony Finau. Let's figure out what we're doing between like 94 and maybe like 10-7, I guess, with Zara Taurus. Maybe we'll do that.
Yeah. Okay. And I would say that the number of golfers I want to use in that range is pretty low, but there are some guys I feel pretty good about. And one of them could be Tony Finau. I've tried to be skeptical of him recently because I've not used Finau in a very long time in DFS, and I typically love him, but he just keeps putting up good finishes. Most recently, he was runner-up at the RBC Canadian Open. Part of that was he gained 6.4 strokes on the green, but Finau also gained 11.8 tee to green in that event. That was his 3rd straight event, gaining 5+ tee to green, and his 2nd time topping 11 in his past 5 events. Talk about spike weeks. Tony Finau's had him here recently. Finau back up to 19th off the tee and 16th in approach the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National. The longer-term numbers are still underwhelming relative to other guys in his salary range, but like Finau's been sick recently. So I would include him in this discussion. You said 9-4 on up. I would put Cory Connors and Daniel Berger in there. I know you're lower on Berger, but like I think I've seen enough the past couple events to be in on him. You said it looked like you were going to say something.
I'm not low on Berger.
Oh, okay, you were, but you're back. Okay, we're back on the Berger train.
It was sort of about
he's back to being good Berger.
Nah.
Speaking of 90s, by the way, so Max Homa tweeted a picture of the Brink cover. It's a Disney Channel movie. Mm-hmm. For those of you who were not born in the 90s, it's a Disney Channel movie. I did not make the LIV connection because I'm very stupid. So I liked it because I was like, oh, I love Brink. It's a great movie. I recently rewatched it because I've got Disney Plus. Why not? It still holds up. It still bangs. Not going to lie. Didn't make the connection of like the sellouts. So I liked him because of the picture. I was like, oh, cool. Fun movie. I'm very stupid and didn't make this connection until literally 5 seconds ago. I like him even more now. So maybe I should include Homa in this discussion, but I think Connors, Berger, Tony, and then Homa's kind of like a maybe for me, but I love Hideki. I like Fitz, Burns, Lowry. I should be higher on too. So like, it's mostly the guys at 10-2 or 10-1 and higher, but like I would list out those 3 other guys in the 9,000 range as being guys I'm okay with this week.
So I'm cool with Berger, but I'm realizing I'm too low on Homa. I'm going to include him in my helper on numberFire. I'm going to make that update. I love Sungjae Im. Berger, we can maybe talk about. I don't know if you're going to talk about him later in player picks, but
I'm not.
Billy Horschel, Tommy Fleetwood. So it sounds like we're kind of, again, I know I said I didn't love the 9,000 range. I like Fleetwood. I like Horschel. Love Sungjae. Talking myself into Homa. Berger was sort of like okay, if he needs to hit fairways, bump him up a little bit. But I think that for me, Homa is going to overtake Daniel Berger for me. I'm going to make that edit. Maybe even live during the show so that I get distracted and we have a worse podcast. But
I mean, I just went on a tangent about Brink, which is a mid-90s Disney Channel original movie that of the people, slap. Of the 3 people who decide to listen to this podcast, no one will know except you and me.
Well, I need a team pop.
I still contend that the scene where his dad is growing brats is the best scene in cinematic history.
You would think that.
I've told you this. We've had this discussion. I do think that. Brats are amazing. His dad's cool.
One thing I'll say about Homa, Finau, and Berger, you can put stock into this if you want. I do, because I think that there's merit to this. But if you look at putting splits from within 15 feet, Homa is very good, 83rd percentile. Berger 19th percentile, and Finau 2nd percentile. Finau makes a ton of long putts. He did that this past weekend. I think that's going to stick in people's minds. But like, we all, Tony Finau is not a good putter. He's a really good like lag putter, or he's getting really lucky. But if you look at the putts that he should be able to make, not really there. So for me, I'm gonna put Homa number one between, or I'm gonna put okay. If we do 99 to 98, that's a pretty good 4 with Berger, Sungjae, Finau, Homa. I'm gonna go Sungjae, Homa at the top. Would you put Finau and Berger above those two guys?
Let me check on Sungjae quick. I'd put him above Homa. Sungjae is pretty good.
Yeah.
Dang. Makes it a lot tougher.
Yeah, it's more the upper nines has names, but it's like usually in majors we're like, oh yeah, this guy's like 93.
Yeah, Jason Kokrak at 93 every time. Click. But like, we don't have that this week. I think the lower nines is bad, and I want to avoid it. But if you go with like a balanced lineup where you avoid those top guys, like I have one sitting in front of me where I have Xander at the top. It's like my highest salary guy. I only have one guy below 9.5 and nobody below 9,000. I think that's a pretty fun way to build things, where I skip over that low 9,000 range. It does force me to use like Connors, and like I like Connors. Do you like Connors?
Love Connors. I'm a Connors guy. Yeah.
Okay, I had to make sure. It's a very Seinfeld delivery by you. Anyway, I think that I like that build. I like other builds where I go a bit more top heavy and also avoid the low 9,000 range. But I think that's kind of the takeaway for me is I need to avoid the low 9,000 range outside of Mito Pereira, if you count him as being low 9,000s.
I like Webb at 93.
Talk to me about Webb. Next person in our current form section. Take it away.
Definitely did that on purpose. Didn't luck into that one at all.
Podcast extraordinaire, Brandon Gadula.
It's just the instinct. It's the podcast IQ is just off the charts.
See, this is just evidence that you're good enough for team X-Blades, yet you still choose to hang with the heat check.
We are. Yeah, we would be pup and suds. Usually we're a pretty pro Webb Simpson podcast, but with the injuries, there hasn't really. It's not been Webb Simpson of old. Now, I think he's back on the radar. In 2022, he's made 7 of 9 cuts and has consecutive top 30s to enter the U.S. Open. Those came at the PGA Championship and the Charles Schwab Challenge. Got to be my least favorite tournament to say out loud.
It's awful. It's a nightmare. I can't stand it. I fully agree.
And he had positive strokes gained in all 4 categories in each of those, so that definitely works. Former U.S. Open winner way back in 2012, and that's not going to have a whole lot of bearing here, but it's not nothing, right? And we've seen Webb make 3 straight cuts at majors, including a T20 at the PGA, T35 at the Masters this year. So it helps me believe that Webb is somewhat back to his old ways. He's a bit above average in all 3 tee to green stats over the past 3 months in his 8 events. Not putting particularly well, or maybe he would have a higher salary and even some better results. But is there enough for you for Webb Simpson at 93, or are you just going to jump down and take a little bit more savings with some other options?
Yeah, so I think for me, it comes down to the study you did about stabilization points. Because like for me, I think Webb being quote unquote back is like a 2-event sample personally. Like I think that's where I'm at. And it's hard for me to take those 2 events and overlook really like middling, not bad play, but like middling play because like 93 at a major is not a low salary, I wouldn't say.
Yeah.
Especially because like I can just avoid that range. So like if I had seen enough from Webb, I'd be like, okay, I'll be in this range with him specifically. I think that for me, I'd rather just skip over this range. So relative to other guys in this range, I think Webb's probably better. Would be okay with him there. But if the option is, would I rather skip this tier or use Webb? I think I'd rather skip this tier personally.
Yeah, Webb's the only one between 91 and 94 that I would use. I could throw I'm not going to play Bryson. I'd use Cory Connors at 95. But yeah, this is again usually that range that we sort of are like, let's just play this guy or that guy, and don't really see it that way this week. But Webb, I think, is at least intriguing.
Sure.
And so I wanted to talk about his current form and potential comeback.
I didn't even realize Jason Kokrak actually is near the Coke zone. He's 91 this week, but I'm not on him, so that's why I didn't realize that he was there. So, oh well. I think this range is bad, but it gets a lot better once you get to 9,000 because Mito Pereira is there. Not just Mito, but also Aaron Wise, some other guys are there, and they're pretty good too. But let's talk about Mito here because the last time we were at a major, Mito had his little heartbreak, but hasn't seemed to affect him too much since then, and he's just 9,000 this week. In the two events since, Mito has finished 7th and 13th. He gained at least 9 strokes tee to green in both those. The putting was not great there, but he was stellar in every other part of his game. Plus, Mito's putting is solid overall. He ranks 40th in strokes gained putting the past 50 rounds. He's 9,000. He should get steam, but we usually never see value plays become prohibitively popular. So for cash games, love him. I'm going to have a hard time getting off him in tournaments too. Where do you stand on Mito Pereira at 9,000 this week?
Yeah, love Mito. One of my favorite plays in the field. He'll have to overcome the letdown at the PGA, but everything else is good. T7 at Charles Schwab, my favorite event to say, as I mentioned earlier. T13 Memorial, like those are good results in solid enough fields. Good putter, really good splits from within 15 feet. Can get out of trouble with that kind of stuff. And I know the irony in saying this, but really good at gaining fairways, 83rd percentile. So again, I understand how much irony there is in that statement, but usually hits the fairway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Mito's great. In on him for sure. I think that I mentioned that Zara Taurus is probably my favorite guy relative to salary. The one guy who at least challenges him there is Mito. So very into Mito Pereira for this week. Let's take a look at what the bookmakers are saying for this week over at FanDuel Sportsbook, where Rory McIlroy is a favorite. He is 11-1 to win. Justin Thomas is 12-1, followed by Scotty Scheffler at 13-1. As you mentioned, John Rahm has shortened. He is back down to 15-1. We got Cam Smith and Xander Schauffele both sitting at 21-1. Then we have Jordan Spieth, Patrick Cantley, 24-1. Matty Fitzpatrick, or Matt, is 25-1. Will Zalatoris, 28-1. And then rounding the top group, Sam Burns and Colin Morikawa, both 29-1. We talked a lot about that upper tier, but I want to get your final answer. If you have one single entry lineup where you're considering roster rates and stuff like that, are you jamming in one of those top 4, or are you going a bit more balanced this week?
I'm playing either Rory or JT in that specific conversation.
Okay.
I can differentiate elsewhere. I know that there's a lot of volatility in golf, but in a major, there's a little bit less because the better players should emerge more often than not. Really hard to see how JT or Rory come out and miss a cut. I don't want to jinx it, but I don't believe in the jinx. And so for me, I'm going to go with Rory or JT in that conversation, leaning toward Rory, even with the assumption that he'll come in at a higher roster rate than JT.
I think that's where I'm at too. If it's a single entry lineup, I feel like I probably would go that way, with the caveat being I do want to have for multi-entry a good number of lineups where I go more balanced. So I think for me, it's I like balance more on principle, but I like Rory and JT a lot. And it's not a FOMO thing. I just think they're objectively good plays. And that's why I would be more okay getting to them for a single entry type of event. And I would for single entry, I'm okay letting roster rates play a bit more of a deciding factor if I go Rory versus JT, but it'd probably be one of those two guys for that situation. I also want to ask you for a second here about Colin Morikawa, because we have not mentioned him yet. He is
Spieth.
What?
Or Spieth.
Yeah. Jordan Spieth had some pretty solid showings recently. Spieth is 11-3. Morikawa is 11-4. Both these guys have longer odds to win relative to other guys in their tier. Does that push you off them? Does that incentivize you to look at them because it means they'll likely be lower rostered? What are your thoughts on those two we've kind of just entirely glossed over so far?
I prefer Spieth because he's a very good wedge player. I always still think of some chips I've seen him hit that remain in the rough, and that's why I don't just watch golf and like think that I see every shot. I let the data do the talking.
Yeah.
96th percentile adjusted wedge play from him. For Morikawa, 16th percentile. Both are actually very bad putters right now. For Spieth, that's because, well, for both, it's because they're not good from within 15 feet, and that's where the majority of your putts come from. But between the two, I'm going Spieth, but it's really hard to look at Spieth over Xander from a DFS standpoint. You can definitely argue that Spieth has the more proverbial upside because he converts the wins. But in terms of the spike week numbers, Xander does it better. So I'm going to go with Xander over Spieth and Spieth over Morikawa.
I agree with that as well. Which golfers' odds have shifted most significantly of late? Obviously, U.S. Open odds have been up for a year, but most recently, whose odds have shifted the most?
Yeah, so I pulled, I think, Saturday just to see like how Sunday affected everything. And unfortunately for me, Rory shortened from 14-1 to 11-1 to now be the now to be, I don't want to spell my infinitive, to be the favorite. JT 14-12, Sam Burns 33-29, Tony Finau 41-34, our guy Max Homa, golf better, 50-36.
That's pretty good.
That one's for us. Horschel,
whole
Billy
podcast
Horschel
has been, for being honest. Golf better.
Billy Horschel 50-37, Cory Connors, our guy 65-48.
Get that steam, Corey. Get it.
Mito Pereira, also our guy 65-55.
And I think that's worth noting. I typically look at movement in terms of judging roster rate. I think, so you see Homa move, you see Connors move, Mito move. I don't think that means they will be heavily rostered because A, it's a major, which kind of dilutes roster rates to begin with, just because like there's a lot of people you can use. But also we don't typically see value plays be prohibitively popular, as I mentioned before. So despite the fact Mito is mentioned there, Connors, Homa, I wouldn't make that lead you to think that they'll be prohibitively popular for this week.
Yeah, and I didn't list out like the golfers whose odds have lengthened because basically everyone else's have, but some notables are DJ and Brooks. I mentioned they were 44-1. They were 33-1. Tommy Fleetwood was 50-1. He is now 65-1. And then who else was it that I saw that was notable here? Louis 50-75 as well. Like those are pretty substantial movements from some golfers who might get some appeal. And then Tyrrell Hatton as well, 65-90. So maybe some golfers you were thinking did have their odds lengthened quite substantially over the weekend.
Okay. Which lower salary golfers have odds that are noteworthy to you?
So if you look at golfers with salaries of 9,500 and lower, with the best win odds, we have Cory Connors now at 48-1. Again, his salary is 9,500, so definitely not like a value play, but he's probably going to be one of the more popular plays. Probably the most popular play in the like mid-range if we don't use Jim's very liberal definition of the mid-range.
It changes. It's malleable. Yeah.
Mito Pereira 55-1, again 9,000. We both like him. We're not going to be alone in that, but can't imagine necessarily that Mito is like the chalk. Justin Rose bogeyed the last to shoot a 60 on Sunday. I liked him before a great showing at the RBC Canadian Open. He is 70-1, salary of 8,800. Aaron Wise 75-1, Davis Riley 75-1 as well. Harold Varner III, Keegan Bradley, Abraham Answer, Patrick Reed all 90-1, and then Taylor Gooch, Seamus Power, and Webb Simpson all 100-1.
With Rose, he's 88, like you mentioned. Did that spike week at the Canadian Open, was pretty good at the PGA Championship too. Is that enough to convince you that this is legit? Because you said you liked him before the Canadian Open. What put you on him there, and where are you thinking about him right now?
Just sort of like long-term seeing enough at a value salary, someone who won't be phased by playing in a major. And right now, no weaknesses in his game, no real strengths, nothing to point to and be like, wow, he's playing at like an elite level, but no real weaknesses in his game. He's unsurprisingly more accurate than he is long, which is kind of, fine for me this week. Good putter, good bogey avoider. So that's kind of where I am with Rose.
I think that makes sense. I think that he deserves to be on a radar too. We'll talk about Aaron Wise as a guy to consider later on. First, so let's talk about the weather. As of now, it does look like those teeing off earlier Thursday will have a wind advantage. Winds start low Thursday, around 5 miles per hour, and increase in the afternoon. Then Friday is more constant the entire day. Winds will not be too crazy for the weekend, but it will be in the double digits both Friday and Saturday. So worthwhile to check back on later. We're talking here Monday. It's going to change before then, most likely. But I do think there's a chance that the earlier Thursday tee times get a slight advantage. So be sure to check back on that on Wednesday night when we'll have a better read on weather at that time. With that said, let's dive into our player picks here for the U.S. Open, starting the upper tier on FanDuel.com. Brandon, who are you turning to among the studs for this week?
Rory.
Cory McIlroy.
Yeah.
Cory McIlroy, because he's back.
Sure, let's do that. You can do that one. I'm going to call him Rory.
Cory McIlroy.
But yeah, I liked him before the win. Of course, I'm glad that he won because it provided a lot of drama and some good sound bites. But
good content.
From a selfish standpoint, I was hoping maybe just like a top 10 that people didn't quite notice because he was going to be my pick. Like, let's say Wednesday, like leading in Wednesday last week. Yeah. I was like, I think it's Rory's week. I'm sticking with it. I thought I'd talk myself out of it. Try to be too contrarian, but I'm not going to do that. If you look at those spike week numbers that I mentioned, only JT beats him. And even though you don't probably think of this, he can get hot with the putter, and you want to see that from any golfer in any type of setup, especially major, because with Rory, it's not just the putting. Obviously, that's the bonus to what is great tee to green play. He's good on POA, 86th percentile POA putter over the past 50 rounds on tour. Again, I was in on him before this because he's trending up. Everything looks good. The upside's there. Showed that last week. And I'm not talking myself out of him just because he won last week. It's not going to be the typical like post-win I'm not saying there won't be a letdown because we're asking him to win a major, but he's not going to show up to the driving range and just phone it in this week. And if anything, he's going to be even more motivated to win again this week, win that major.
Yeah, and I think that like a lot of times when we talk about like, oh, I'm off this guy because he won this past week, it's because of roster rate stuff. But like, he's going to like, will the gap between him and JT, Scheffler, Rahm be big enough to like really get scared? I don't think so. That's my read right now is I don't think it'll be a big enough gap to like be very wary. Like if he had come in at 11-1 as opposed to 11-7, maybe, but that's not the case. So I would bet that it's like over under gap between Rory and JT roster rate. I'm going to say 5.5 percentage points. Over under for you.
Probably over by a little bit, but
not a lot.
Not substantially. I think also like Rory lost strokes putting on Sunday. He could have like ran away with it. Honestly, like there were times down the stretch where you weren't even certain he was going to win, which is not necessarily the most ringing endorsement for my major pick of the week. But like, I think there's enough for people to still be a little bit nervous about with Rory. And so for me, he's my guy.
Okay. I'm going to talk about Xander Schauffele because what Xander gets me is access to elite iron play without breaking the bank, because Xander ranks 9th in approach the past 50 rounds, and he's still doing well in the other areas too. We've seen Xander consistently be near the front, even with no spikes recently outside of the Zurich. Obviously, that doesn't really count. But he was 5th at the Byron Nelson. He was 13th at the PGA Championship, 18th at the Memorial. And it seems like Xander's in good enough form where we can trust the plus history he has shown in majors. Obviously, like, hasn't won, but like, he's been consistently in contention, and I get that for 11-1. So obviously, like I said, single entry, I'm probably going Rory as my top guy, but I want to have lineups where I build more balance. And I think that Xander is a good route for doing so at 11-1. I'm also not opposed to like even going to like Cantley or Zara Taurus as my top guy. Not opposed to that, but I think that Xander is very much in play. So you mentioned that you're not really on him this week. What's the main drawback for you at Xander?
No. It's just I'm not clinging to Xander over other plays like I normally would. Love Xander. He's in the helper on numberFire. I wanted to ask you a bit of trivia. 5 U.S. Opens for Xander Schauffele.
I thought you were going to ask who else was in the field with Matty Fitz when he won the amateur thing, because Xander was there too, wasn't he?
That I don't know.
Oh, did I just get Xander trivia on you? Whoa.
There's a lot I don't know about a lot of things, Jim, and I'm willing to admit that. One thing I do know, because I'm looking at it right now, 5 U.S. Opens for Xander. What do you think his worst result has been?
So 5 U.S. Opens, that means 2018?
2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021.
Worst result, 23rd.
T7.
Oh, buddy. It's pretty good.
It's not bad.
It's not bad. That's for sure.
One of those like I'm like, is this right? Do I gotta like double check it?
Yeah. So pretty good. Who else do you like in the upper range for this week?
A lot of guys, but I'm you're going to talk about someone I think I'd rank above this person, but I don't want to like ignore Shane Lowry at 10-4. Around the green play for Lowry, probably not as good as you think if you think of what Shane Lowry does. And the iron play probably better than you would think from Shane Lowry. 95th percentile iron player, 63rd percentile, so still good around the greens, but that's a pretty fantastic combo for this U.S. Open for how it should play. With the small greens, guys are going to miss greens. It's going to be difficult to get up and down, and you want both irons and wedges this week. Pretty balanced driver off the tee. I think he's just like in a good spot to play good golf this week. I'm not like convinced he's going to be in my cash game lineup, but he honestly might be at that salary.
I think that's fair. I think that I don't know if you have this experience ever, but you get to the end of like building lineups and you look at your exposure and you're like, dang, I kind of wish I'd had more of this person. I'm worried he'll be that guy this week. But usually what I'll do is I'll go back and add more. Mm-hmm. So I think if I tell myself beforehand, like, hey, don't forget Shane Lowry, I want to consciously make an effort to use him enough to where I benefit if he does well. Because I think that like, if you look at his true strokes gain numbers the past 6 months, it's sick.
So good.
Yeah, it's real good. It's because of the irons, and that's what I want. Mm-hmm. So I want to make a conscious effort to be in on Shane Lowry for this week. Not get like I do want a lot of Burns, and I do want a lot of Zara Taurus and stuff like that. But I want to make sure I'm not doing that at the expense of Lowry. Maybe more so at the expense of Finau, more so at the expense of I don't know, someone else. Like I want to make sure. Like that's part of why I want to go balance too, is because I want exposure to all these guys. And I think that I need to be conscious to get Lowry in there.
Yeah. And if you build around the studs, even one or two of them, like, you know, I have Rory and Zara Taurus in a lineup. Zara Taurus not even being like over salaried by any means. Two sort of value plays in the 9,000 range. Then you have 9,850 left for two golfers. If you like 5 or 6 of these names, and that's sort of how you build your lineup, you're going to be a little bit light on a lot of the names. So if you go balanced, you can get access to still very, very good golfers with maybe one value play. It's got a lot of appeal this week.
Yep, I think so as well. Okay, let's talk about Will Zalatoris here because he is my second player pick. You mentioned that you might rank him above Lowry. I think that he's a very good play, and he will be in my head-to-head lineup versus you. I can guarantee you that. Because Zalatoris is just an undersalaried, elite ball striker, ranks 9th in strokes gained off the tee and 8th in approach the past 50 rounds. And that's allowed him to push for wins, even in elite fields, even in spots where I care about, like, putting. He's still been good, despite the fact he's not a good putter. So, obviously, like, the putter is not great. The around the green play is slightly above average, which is kind of a negative compared to some guys in this range. But, like, you know, it's not bad. Just not elite like he is from a ball striking perspective. So Zalatoris to me, a key building block for this week. Any final thoughts for him or anyone else in this upper tier?
Love Zalatoris. He would have been my second guy if I didn't want to sort of differentiate and talk about Lowry.
Okay. Let's go to the mid-range.
Sung Jae.
Targeting there. Okay.
I like Sung Jae in this week, 98. Not the longest hitter, but quite accurate off the tee, which is something that I'm looking for this week. Good irons, 82nd percentile or better in strokes gained, 82nd percentile in adjusted strokes gained approach around the green plus putting. So basically, if you remove off the tee play, one of the better golfers from that standpoint. 99th percentile bogey avoider, 76th percentile expected putter, good on POA, good recent major history. I'm in on Sungjae.
Yeah, you asked me to rank these guys earlier, and I said I had Berger and Finau above Sungjae. I think, correct? Did I? No, I refused to answer. I think that's
no.
probably...
You said I said I like Sungjae and Homa better than Finau and Berger.
Yeah.
So basically, two guys at the same salary. So I'm not gonna do a combined head to head, but I would take individual head to heads on.
No, I think
Homa.
What I was gonna say, I think I need to bump up Sungjae.
Yeah.
So I talked about I got to the end and I'm like, I don't like Shane Lowry enough. I'm saying now I need to readjust on Sungjae. I think he's probably my favorite guy in this tier the more I think about it. So I'm bumping him up. I think he's a great play this week. I think I'll put him one of a very good group. I think I'll put him first there personally. Let's talk about Hideki. Hideki is 10-2. He was not great at the PGA Championship, and he was not off to a blazing start at the Memorial before he got disqualified. But 10-2 still feels too low for Hideki. Before those two events, Hideki was third at the Byron Nelson. He was 14th at the Masters. The Byron Nelson was especially encouraging because it was after he had taken about a month off for his neck injury. If you remember, he's hurt right before Augusta. Played Augusta and was fine, took a month off and came back at the Byron Nelson and was pretty good there. I still think he has good upside and kind of hard for me to turn that down at 10-2 if he's going to be that low salary. So I like Hideki a lot. Where do you come out on Hideki this week?
He might be like the guy. Well, I was going to say he might be the guy I'm feared of being too low on, but I think it's probably Sam Burns. So
okay.
But Hideki's sort of in that conversation where you can't play everyone. You can't talk about everyone. I think for me, Hideki's going to miss the cut in my player pool, but really do like the fit overall for him.
Okay. Who else do you like in this mid-range on FanDuel?
Tommy Fleetwood, 9,600. I'm coming around on him. Again, not as good of a ball striker as what it feels like people think he is. 61st percentile for me over the past year. But good other than that. More of a bogey avoider than a birdie maker as well, which is fine by me for a U.S. Open. Very good short game, 91st percentile in combined around the green and putting play over the past year. And he's made 18 of 20 cuts in majors since 2017 with 8 top 25s. Not necessarily expecting a win. His win odds did fall from 50-1 to 65-1. Not that means he can't win, but looking more for like a balanced option to sort of round out some lineups. Fleetwood's going to be in that conversation for me.
Where is he compared to Connors for you?
I knew you were going to ask that. I think a tick above Connors, and that feels dirty because Cory Connors is our guy.
Okay, so let me talk about Connors because he's my player pick here, and I do like him more than Fleetwood. Connors, we know about the ball striking, and that's been elite for a very long time, but he's been getting better on the greens too. He actually gained 4.7 last week at the RBC Canadian Open. That was the third time Connors has gained at least 1.5 strokes putting in the past 5 events, which could mean that he's due for regression, but also it's over a larger sample too. Since the start of the swing season, Connors has had 16 measured events. He has gained strokes in 9 of them, so more than half, and he's gained at least 2.4 strokes putting 4 separate times. If he can keep that up with the ball striking he's had for a very long time, he's going to be a threat for top 10s, and Connors has showed that in majors. He has 3 top 10s and 5 top 20s this past 7 majors, so I'll be very high on him at 9.5. What is your read on Connors this week? Obviously, you're not saying you dislike him, but putting Fleetwood above him, but what's your read on him for this week?
Like him probably more for a win bet than a DFS lineup, surprisingly. The issue for me is that the around the green play is really bad.
Yeah, that's fair.
It used to be the putter. Now it's less the putter and more the wedge play. And if I do believe in the data here and just sort of how this course should play, these guys are going to miss greens. And if you're not getting up and down well, you're not hitting the wedge as well. That's an issue. And that's why I think for me, ultimately, Fleetwood is a tick above Connors.
Okay. You want to do a bet?
I don't want to, but I'll do it for the sake of the show.
I mean, no one checks back on these.
I do. I have to. I'm the record keeper.
Yeah, I don't have to. It's great. I just lay out these bets and then
never think about them ever again.
Forgot that I picked Rory. Okay.
I already have my picks written down, by the way. So
I'm still behind you from a units perspective, so it doesn't really matter that I picked Rory and won, but whatever. Wasn't Burns like 34 when you got him?
29.
Yeah, well, I'll be digging out that hole for a while. Okay, so I have Cory Connors FanDuel points. You have Tommy Fleetwood FanDuel points. I am gifting you $100 of salary, by the way. Just had to note that. Let's move to the value range. Who stands out to you there this week?
Mito. Mm-hmm. I think he's our guy in the value range. Nearly won the PGA, which we know, but that wasn't a fluke. Like, he's a very, very, very good golfer. Long-term strokes gain data. Really good, accurate driver, which again, I know kind of funny, but like good expected putter, just good results too that stem from good underlying data. And I don't want to gloss over Mito. He's going to be an anchor in my lineups this week.
Anchor for me, cash game lock. So the two I've gifted you as far as a head-to-head, I will have Zara Taurus and I will have Mito. Like, I see no reason not to. Yeah. They're both phenomenal plays. Mito, great ball striking, no real holes in his game right now. He's shown since the PGA Championship that's not going to like negatively impact him mentally, which I thought was a concern at one point because that's really tough to go through. But he's been great, so still love him. Love him for cash games, love him for tournaments. Very high in him for this week. Who else do you like in the value tier this week?
I was going to say Tom Hoge at 84 as the lowest I'll go. But realistically, if I'm building a lineup against you that I want to sort of play in a head-to-head, I'm not going to get there. I'm going to pivot then to Russell Henley at 8,900. One of the better major performers that we've had in recent years, 11 for 13 and made cuts since 2017. Not a whole lot of upside with just 3 top 25s, but we know that he's accurate and then he hits irons well. And that alone is good enough for me to consider him as someone I would play in a head-to-head again. Couldn't quite get there with Tom Hoge. Justin Rose also in that conversation, though.
What about Hoge for tournaments? I think that he has a decent amount of appeal there, correct?
Yeah. Yep. For tournaments, I'm much more in. Very good tee to green upside for him, about field average, putting upside. Just great iron player. I've been the 80th percentile in this field in long-term iron play. You like to see that for such a low salary. But I always feel a little bad that we don't say like, oh yeah, this guy like 7,500 is the play. In majors, I don't really like to do that very much because you need great golfers or extreme outlier performances that you can't really predict anyway. So Hoagie's the lowest I'm willing to go with a modicum of confidence, and I'll play him, but I think I got to mention Russell Henley over Hoge a little bit more.
Yeah. I like Henley. I will go to Hoge for like my Rory lineups if I need a way, like a skeleton key kind of guy to like avoid. I don't know if that's the right usage of that term, but anyway, if I need like a cheat code to like help me avoid the low 9,000 range, I would use Hoge for that. Definitely okay with him. Okay with Henley too. My second low salary guy and the way I want to play things is not using anyone below Henley, and one of the guys I like to include in there is Aaron Wise. He's exactly $9,000. He is one of the best iron players in the field. Kind of turn that down for 9,000. Wise ranks 12th in approach the past 50 rounds. He is also 24th in strokes gained off the tee. Short game is lacking for sure, but that hasn't stopped him from having good showings in majors. He hasn't played a lot of majors recently because he hasn't qualified, but like his most recent two were both PGA championships. He was top 25 in both those. Even digging back to the archives, 2019, Wise made all 4 cuts in the majors he played, never finished worse than 41st. The form right now is really nice, so I'm very okay with him at 9,000. So I like Wise at 9,000. I would also mention Keegan at 86. Keegan's performance in majors is pretty bad recently. So that did lower me on him where I preferred to go with Wise, but Wise, Henley, Hoge, Keegan, Mito, I think that should be enough to give you a pretty solid core. I would also be receptive to Seamus Power and Justin Rose as other potential value plays. So I think that for me, what I want to do is, commit to Mito and then maybe rotate that second value play in the lineup. I think that's probably the way I wind up playing things here.
Yeah, I kind of like Kevin Na a little bit too, if I'm looking more for a value, but he's got a lot. He's gonna. Yeah. He thinks it's gonna be fine, so maybe he's not that worked up about it.
Maybe. We shall see. Okay, win picks for this week. You said you have yours written down already. This is based on the odds over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Who are you going with?
I'm going to stick with Rory at 11-1. He was my guy. I don't want to regret not picking him. And then I'm going to go with Will Zalatoris at 28.
Yeah. So I think my key decision is whether I block you on Zalatoris, because I think that he is a good person to pick, or if I go elsewhere. If you hadn't picked Zalatoris, I definitely would have picked him.
No, there's nothing stopping you. I don't want to hear it. No, there's not.
No, you're right. You were correct. I'm going to take Shane Lowry for sure. I've picked him like 47 times. I picked him last week. I know that, in addition to Rory. Pick him again, though. He's been very good. So I'll take Lowry at 30-1 as one of mine. And then the question is, do I block you on Zalatoris? Or do I go elsewhere?
I don't know. What you going to do?
I don't know. Why'd you ask that?
You asked it. This is your fourth time picking Shane Lowry. Maybe we should like submit these in advance. Well, then we don't have all the intriguing dead air at the end of the show. But I was thinking like, this is Jim's fourth selection of Shane Lowry this year. Like some
like the Emmys or the Oscars? Yeah. Is that what this is? This is Shane Lowry's fourth time being nominated by Jim Sonis. He has been jinxed every time.
And Cam Tringale last year.
Cam Tringale was like the Leo DiCaprio, always nominated, never winning. I'm going to block you on Zalatoris, I think.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I think relative to odds, he's the one who is... And I can't go like with a long shot this week. Like, do I think that you can make a strong case for Sungjae's odds being too long? Yes. Do I think he's going to win? Probably not. So I'll go with that. I think that I will go with Shane Lowry and Will Zalatoris. Not changing my mind this time. Shane Lowry, Will Zalatoris. You have Will Zalatoris and Rory Mcilroy for this week. That is what we got here for the podcast for today for the U.S. Open. Brandon, any final thoughts before we send off the good people to fill out their DFS lineups for this week?
As always, I think the only thing worth saying at the end of a major show is like a lot of plays are viable. We have specific plays we like more than others, but it's only nitpicks over like a John Rahm, a Scotty Scheffler. So if there's guys you feel like are just being overlooked, please play them. You'll in tournaments, maybe not in cash games, but
right.
Just be willing to pivot from what you're hearing for your tournaments.
Yeah, and keep your ear to the ground. Try to see if someone will be prohibitively popular. I don't think they will as of right now. But also check out the weather again Wednesday night just to check back on that. Don't make major tweaks based on it, but it definitely does matter for sure. So stay tuned to that stuff as the week goes along. That is all that we have here for today on the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast. As mentioned, that we do have a lot of other stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. MLB every weekday. We have NASCAR, UFC, and of course PGA every week, all in the same place. Hit subscribe. If you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I'm on Twitter at Jim Sonis, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for this week. Good luck to you with your USGA DFS lineups. I never know what to say because I can't say PGA DFS. USGA, your golf, daily fantasy golf.
US Open, maybe?
I don't know. US Open DFS lineups, whatever it may be. PGA DFS is easier. Whatever. USGA, sue me. Anyway, good luck. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.